Human trafficking is horrific, but very real indeed. You need to be careful who you can trust with your information, as people aren't always as kind-hearted as they may seem. So get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Number 1. I was born in the northeast of Brazil, a region known for its marvelous beaches. I was quite a pretty child, and everyone used to pay attention to me whenever I was out with my parents. Fortunately, my parents always took care of me and never left me alone for a second with strangers, not to mention the fact that our house was a fortress. Just like many houses around here, we had giant walls and fences around the house to keep intruders out. This story took place when I was around 5 or 6 years old, around the year 1995, and I was going out with my mother to the farmer's market downtown. I used to live around 5 to 8 minutes away, and it was morning, and there were a lot of people at the bus stop, including this one creepy woman standing up in front of us. There was nothing really creepy about her looks, but I remember that she was the first person I noticed when we stopped there. I always had a strong gut feeling to what people are up to, and I did not like her when I glanced. She was wearing a sleeveless white shirt, blue jeans, and black shoes. Really 90s. She was looking around as if she was looking for someone, and then she looked back and saw me. It was the only time she gave a glance to my mum. Really quick. And after that, she couldn't take her eyes off me, almost as if I was some kind of prize. Back then, we used combis as a kind of public transportation. Now, for those of you who don't know, combis are a form of community shuttle bus. When this one arrived, my mum pulled my hand gently to warn me that we could go in the car. Before we got in though, this woman ran and passed in front of me to sit in the middle bench, just where we were going to sit. It was okay. We got in anyway, and I sat with this woman on my left and my mother on my right-hand side. Until that point, my face was the same. I never spoke, smiled, or did anything different than give this woman a mean look. I did not like her, and wanted to show that I knew she was a problem. But once I sat on her side, she started to grin in a creepy way, and started to bend down, as if trying to talk to me. She began really low, and I ignored her. I wanted to look onto the other side, but I felt as if I needed to pay attention to whatever she could do. I needed to have her in my field of vision. I remember her asking my name, my age, if I liked school, and I remained silent and touched my mum's leg. My mum noticed and told her out loud to stop trying to talk to me. The woman was ignoring my mother and kept trying to talk to me, so my mum yelled, "Wanna talk? Talk to me, bitch," and moved me right to her side, staying between me and this creepy woman. Even with my mother in the middle, the woman didn't stop trying to talk to me, and I remember my mum telling me to show my tongue to her, to try to make her stop. I did the best I could and showed her my tongue with a really mean face, but the grin never subsided from hers. By this point we'd reached our destination, and my mother and I got out of the combi really quickly and started walking hands-on. And this is when the scariest moment of all happened. I had the feeling that I needed to look back, and I did just that, only to find out that the woman also left the combi after us. I saw her standing up in the front of a car, looking at us walking, and then she looked to her left side, which was an avenue. I felt that I had to follow her eyes, and I did it again. And I thanked myself every day that I followed my instincts that day. I found out that she was looking directly at these two men standing on the other side of the avenue, and gave them a kind of signal with her hand and pointed to us. They spotted us in the crowd and started running towards us. I pulled my mother's arm and told her to watch out. My mother told me to run like I'd never run before and to not let go of her hand. I did just that, and I ran as fast as I could with my mum, just as we were being chased by these three strange people. We were done if they caught us. These guys were really tall and fast. One of them a skinny blonde guy with white shirt, blue jeans and a funny hat, and the other one was a muscle man with a dark shirt and also blue jeans. My mother didn't want to stop and ask for help without a police car near us, so we ran as fast as we could between many streets and the main church. We ran about 4 to 5 blocks around the church, and then a police car appeared in the parking lot in front of it. We ran until we reached the middle of the patio, and my mum turned back and started screaming for help. Then the crowd stopped and tried to hold the guys whilst the police noticed, and they came to the rescue. My mum yelled everything that they were trying to do to us, and that the woman was following us. But in the confusion, the woman ran away and the police arrested the two guys. They were known criminals. Meanwhile, a friend of my mother that used to drive combi saw us and offered to take us home. My mother accepted, and we went home without pressing charges. We both thought it was wrong. We both wanted to make sure they got punished for it, but at the time, it seemed like the best decision. We just wanted to get out of there, and it took me weeks before I went out again. A few weeks later, I got really happy that we didn't decide to pursue this further and take them to the police station. Our friend's neighbour called my mum to tell her to watch the TV on Channel 2. It was the local news, and on it, we see the same lady. My mum and I sat to watch it, and there was the same woman arrested for trying to kidnap a kid in a city nearby, with two other giant scary guys. In the end, they mentioned she was a known member of a kidnap chain that sold children's organs on the black market, and sometimes sold children to foreign families for adoption. I got happy because these people could never have access to our documents because we never pressed charges. Never underestimate the corruption of officers. And I'm so glad that they will never be able to find me again. So creepy woman, let's not meet. Number 2. This happened in the early 2000s. I was vacationing on the Caribbean with my family when I was around 9 or 10 years old. This particular island, like many of the Caribbean islands, was largely impoverished. Of course, the resort communities were where all the tourists flocked to this beautiful slice of paradise. As a young kid staying at a fancy vacation spot, you don't really think about the reality that you're in a foreign country that you don't know very well. You're not familiar with what goes on outside the gated resort, and you certainly aren't aware that as well as being known for gorgeous beaches, many islands in the Caribbean are hubs for human trafficking and drug smuggling. The sheer sketchiness and what I'm about to describe didn't fully hit me until years later when I was in high school, reading about the disappearances of Amy Bradley and Natalie Holloway, who both vanished whilst vacationing on the Caribbean in the late 90s and early 2000s. One night, I left the resort with my family to go to one of those sunset boat ride sort of deals. We joined another family and took the shuttle to a marina that was maybe half hour away from the resort. I remember as we rode to the marina, I got more of a sense of how destitute some of the less touristy areas on the island were. I saw many of the locals living in small, ramshackle huts made out of salvaged metals that was the landscape of a very much barren desert, unlike the lush gardens that were watered daily within the walls of the resort. The shuttle dropped us off by the docks, and we hit the boat tour. It was an amazing time. The boat's crew pointed out unique wildlife and told us about the history of the island. By the time we returned to the docks, it was pitch black, and probably around 11 PM. And with me barely being 10 years old, I was thoroughly exhausted. I hopped out of the boat and walked along the deck, back to the parking lot where the shuttle had dropped us off earlier. My parents and the other adults who were with me didn't really seem to be paying attention to me, thanks to Captain Morgan and Stella Artois. And by the time they'd gotten off the boat, I was probably a decent 200 feet ahead of them. Now the marina itself was very well lit, but as soon as I turned the corner to the parking lot, I may as well have fallen into a cave. I could hardly see a thing. I squinted my eyes to try and see if the van that we'd arrived in was parked nearby. But after a few seconds, somebody suddenly grabbed my shoulder very tightly. "Who did you come with here?" The voice was scolding, accusatory, and I immediately began to freak out because I thought I was in trouble. "Somebody drove you here." I began to speak to try and explain that I was with my family and they're waiting for our driver, but the man cut me off. "You drove here with me. Here, come to my car." At this point, the guy began pulling me further and further into the dark parking lot towards a vehicle I'd never seen before. I wouldn't even say that I was panicking at this point. I was very confused, and I knew that something was definitely not right about the situation, and didn't want to get into trouble for not listening to the guy. But as he continued to pull me towards his car, I realized that it was too small to fit the number of people who I'd arrived with. And this was when I started to get really scared and pulled back against the guy, trying to break his grip. I was about to raise my voice and start screaming, when suddenly a set of floodlights turned on and lit up the parking lot. My parents and the group of people we were with turned the corner, and the guy immediately let go of my arm. I looked up at him, and I recall that he looked scary. He was bald and had scars all over his face. He was probably in his late 40s. Clearly, he didn't realize that the entire group of people were just 30 seconds behind me. His eyes were wide and dumbfounded, and he had an "oh shit" expression on his face. One of the men who worked at the docks called out and said something to him, but he sort of just threw up his arms and shrugged and quickly walked away. On the way back to the resort, my father asked me what the guy wanted from me, and in my childish naivety, I said, I think he thought I rode in his shuttle, and that I was lost or something, and apparently this explanation was perfectly reasonable, because we never spoke about it again. Anyway, I guess the moral of the story is that if you have young children and like to take them with you on exotic or unfamiliar locations, remind them to be smart and keep their guard up, even in paradise. Number 3. Between August 2012 and June 2013, I was 20, and my boyfriend Ryan was living abroad in Trieste, Italy as a teacher. We're both from New England, and I was unfortunately stuck at home from my junior year of college. 10 months is a long time to be in a long-distance relationship for. So, for Christmas, my parents told me I could go visit Ryan over his February holidays, which fell on his birthday and Valentine's Day. In short, it was perfect. When the time came, I sat at the airport and sent Ryan a quick goodbye and happy birthday via text message, as I knew that I wouldn't have service on the flight or when I got to Europe. He wasn't able to meet me at the airport because of work, so he texted me the directions about what to do when I landed in Trieste. The directions went something like this: when you land, go out to the buses. Get on the C bus and take it for about 45 minutes. At the end, you'll be at a train station, and I'll meet you there. It wouldn't hurt to get a map or ask someone for directions if they speak English, but if you follow my directions, you should have no problem. This all seemed pretty straightforward, but to me, I was sitting on a bus, I couldn't help but feel like I'd done something wrong. You know how it is. You're helpless and you always assume the worst. And I was pretty helpless in a foreign country with little knowledge of the language and no travelling companions. So naturally I was worried. I decided to try and communicate with the woman next to me just to calm my nerves. Scusi, inglese? Parlare inglese? She made a face and held up a finger to show me she spoke a little English. Oh, grazie. I'm looking for the train station. Stazione treno? Dove? I pulled out the map I got at the airport and pointed to the train station. She smiled immediately. Sì, vengo con me. Which I'm pretty sure meant come with me. And even if it didn't, she seemed to know where I wanted to go. And after viewing the map, how could she not? About 15 or 20 minutes into the ride, the bus stops in a really sketchy looking part of the city. The woman stood up and made a come here gesture with her hands. I looked around at all the buildings outside and didn't see a train station anywhere. Ryan had been adamant that I wouldn't miss it, and I'd only been on the bus for half the time he said it would be. Alarm bells started going off in my head. This woman was being so insistent, yet she knew exactly where I wanted to go because I'd shown her on the map, and this clearly wasn't it. Then she grabbed my arm and tried pulling me out of my seat. I'm not having any of this, I said. No grazie, ciao, and waved goodbye. She looked really irritated, but she seemed to give up. I heard her mutter something I couldn't understand in Italian, and that's when 5 dudes stood up from all different parts of the bus and got off with her. The 6 of them were clearly together, yet she'd sat next to me, and had not once talked to any one of them during the course of the 20-minute bus ride. I was a little more than creeped out, but I made it to the bus stop without any further incident, and about half hour later, I mentioned my experience to Ryan, and the 2 of us laughed it off, joking that it could have ended up like the girl from Taken. I may have been overreacting, but sometimes I really wonder. Italy, Trieste in particular, is known for human trafficking. A huge ring was just busted in May of last year. I feel that lonely young foreign travellers are probably pretty easy prey for them, and luring a young girl with a woman, and then using strong men to take her, doesn't seem that far out of the realm of possibility. Bad people or not, it was pretty scary for me, and I'm glad I had enough sense to stay on the bus. Who knows where I'd be now? So sketchy Italian lady and friends, let's not meet again. Number 4. Just let me start off with a bit of background info. At the time that this occurred, I was in a nursing school and struggling to get by. My dad killed himself when I was little, and my mother turned to alcohol after that, so I didn't get much help there. But I was determined to get my degree and have a stable life for myself. I lived in a really crappy ghetto apartment in the scariest part of town. I'm talking gunshots at least once a week, needles on the sidewalk, and the random hours required for clinicals made it hard to hold down a good job. Plus, I didn't have any transportation besides my bike, which was on its last legs. Long story short, I was having a very hard time and looking for any way to make money. Q Jane. She was a good friend of mine who I'd known since freshman year. She'd noticed my situation and told me that she was making $200+ a night at a local strip club. This got my attention, as that was a lot of money. She said the club had a no-touching policy and the guys literally threw money at you. I made the decision to just go with it and went with her one night to check it out. I was graduating in less than a year anyway. Why not? Jane stayed by my side the entire night. I felt safe. No one touched me, and no one harassed me. And I made over $300. I was ecstatic. The best part was that I chose my own hours. and I could make sure work didn't interfere with school. We went a few more times together before she left to visit her family for spring break, and she left me with explicit instructions that if I decided to go to work, I was to take a cab, call her when I left work, and call her when I got there, and text her every hour and call her when I was leaving. This seemed like overkill to me, but I agreed. I finished all my classwork early one night and thought, since it was spring break in a big city, I could probably earn a few $100s extra. I called a cab, called Jane, and went to work. Everything was going fine. I was doing a great job and making more money than I ever had. I was then approached by a girl who I'd seen there before. She introduced herself as Asia, but none of us went by our real names. She talked to me for a bit and asked me where I lived. This sent off tiny alarm bells, but I figured that she was just being friendly, and named another shitty apartment complex near mine. She told me she was looking for a chill roommate and asked if I'd be interested. I was obviously taken aback, but I was dying to get out of my scary place. I asked her how much the rent was, and she said the guy who owned the duplex wasn't charging students as long as they were working. This should have set off even more alarm bells, since I didn't tell Asia that I was a student, but I completely missed that at the time. I was a little cautious, but definitely interested. She told me that she'd take me by the place if I wanted after the club had closed, and I thought there'd be no harm in looking. I called Jane and told her about the situation. She became very quiet and asked me what the girl's name was. I told her, and she responded that I needed to call a cab now and get home now. I was pissed. She was ruining this for me until she explained that Asia was a known prostitute. And long story short, I would have gotten to live there, but as a sex slave. She didn't want me as her roommate. She wanted to bring me back to her pimp. I called a cab and hid in the back until I got there. I heard Asia was looking for me, but I didn't come out. And as soon as I got the text that the cab was there, I ran to the back door and sprinted out of it. I looked back to see the commotion that I had caused. Asia was still looking for me, and a large man turned in the direction. I never worked there again, and graduated a few months later. I now live in a good apartment with a great job at the ER, but I shudder to think what could have happened that night. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Thank you for all your support in the comments section in the last few videos. I'm feeling much better now, and I'm really excited to bring you more original topics and interesting stories soon. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe, as you won't want to miss what I have in store for you next. And if you didn't see yesterday's video, and you want an hour-long, truly epic story, please follow the link at the end of the video. It is amazing, so please go watch it. And if you've had a creepy or paranormal experience that you wish to share, feel free to send it to my email, which you can find in the description. Did you know that I had Instagram and Twitter, which you can now follow me on for some cool updates and behind the scenes? No? Well, it's time to get following, at the Mortis Media. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.